America has become comatose. Many are comatose. Others know something is wrong. The leadership is not popular, but most assume it is normal greed, normal corruption, and incompetence. We're going to show that this is a cop-out. This video is made by Americans to awaken Americans.
Psychopath, first of all, has no remorse. Absolutely zero remorse for what they've done. Secondly, the things that they've done, they've never been impulsive. They've actually planned them. They're actually sat down and they planned them to the nth degree. And it was just business with them to destroy people, destroy lives, destroy companies, destroy countries, and just get in there, do it. And it was never ever, a moral question. It was just, it wanted something. It devised a sneaky and clandestine means of doing it, and then it undertook it without any kind of empathy or compassion for the victims, and wouldn't even understand or wouldn't even know why people would even care. It's selfishness taken to a level that's hard to even comprehend. But they hide it all behind a mask of sanity. And then you don't know what they're like until they reveal themselves.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed videos. Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. That's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Elite ruling psychopaths tend to be intelligent, manipulative, and exploitive people. They are not treatable. They are oftentimes charismatic, and although they make up about 1% of the general population and come from all kinds of backgrounds, races, colors, creeds, religions, they have much higher concentrations of positions of power and control. You very rarely see an artist who is a psychopath. You have heavy concentrations in the military industrial complex, the media, the police and security, judicial, and the intelligence and surveillance state. The best definition of a psychopath is as of a snake. They tend to be more devious and deviant as opposed to psychotic. The elite psychopath can create entities that select and promote other psychopaths. They thrive in a collective environment. They can recognize other psychopaths in a room. They typically have the goods on each other. They can compromise each other. Compromise is a very common tool of the psychopath. They look at others as a different species, themselves as superior. They will form gangs, secret societies, cults. Oftentimes they have satanic components and rituals. There's also some myths around psychopathy. One myth is that they're crazy. That's not entirely true. They're killers. Certainly psychopaths can be killers, but not all killers are psychopaths. It's not necessarily something that psychopaths want to get their hands dirty with. For them, it's strictly business. So if somebody needs to be killed or disposed of, it's nothing personal. It's just business to reaching their end. It's their end that is more important than the means. Average, decent people don't believe that such monsters exist, at least at high levels of power. And boy, is that naive, and boy, is that a conflict and a denial of history in general. It's just almost unbelievable that people engage in that kind of magical thinking. And so they tend to confuse banality with pure evil. There's certain dualism in the world that there are just some people that are just purely evil, just as there are some people that are purely good. Most people are in between, variations of both. There is a psychopathic group that is just pure evil.
Four powerful Hollywood moguls were accused of committing the sexual abuse of teenage boys in 1999. They include X-Men director Bryan Singer, former president of BBC Worldwide America and former head of programming for Fox, NBC, and the WB, Garth Ancier, Gary Goddard, the head of a Los Angeles design group, and former president of Disney TV, David Newman. Mr. Newman previously worked with the ringleader of the perversion, Mark Collins Rector. Mr. Rector is a registered sex offender that pled guilty in 2004 to luring minors across state lines for sexual acts. Sexual abuse of minors by Hollywood big shots is nothing new. The two Coreys, Feldman and Haim, recounted how they were abused by executives. Corey Feldman says it led to Corey Haim's untimely death.
Main model to take away, though, from psychopaths, one of the main models, they love to create things of low intrinsic value, inflate it, and then run. Or these are essentially scams or cons. And in some ways, the Bernie Madoffs of the world are far more risk to people than a small-time con artist doing a sleight of hand game in a local park.
It is not Hannibal Lecter you should fear. It is the modern psychopath like Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff stole $50 billion and had over 4,000 direct victims and hundreds of thousands of indirect victims. Entire family fortunes were lost, and there were a lot of suicide.
They love to engage in divide and conquer strategies or fake partisan politics. They cold read people, do interviews, and just read people in terms of literally sucking up to them and getting their confidence. Ultimately, they love to swim in chaos. The chaos is what brings about the problem, reaction, solution format that they love so much. It creates the chaos, which induces fear in the general population. One of the solutions then offered is war and control, which creates huge looting opportunities. For example, defense contractors get all your proto-psychopathic buddies and minions and cronies in positions of power to loot future generations, such as future generations of Americans. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren are being robbed blind by these people. Then they use psyops to control and manipulate the population. This is where your gaslighting comes into play and neuro-linguistic program. And we'll give you several examples of this. The first being Michael Chertoff, and then an example of a Fox television interview with Sean Hannity employing a certain degree of sorcery and neuro-linguistic program to impact the audience.
What's your general viewpoint about people who think the federal government was involved with 9/11?
I think that that's in the same category as Holocaust denial and those people who still aren't convinced that President Obama was born in Hawaii. It's kind of a out there conspiracy theory, which
The great majority of the world's Muslims believe that 9/11 was an inside job. But that's your opinion, right?
Again, manipulation is all about timing and redirecting and trying to take control of somebody when they're speaking. Here, you see a great example of that by saying, that's your opinion.
Barrett, Sean Hannity here. Do you really believe that 9/11 was an inside job?
Okay, Sean Hannity. I never watched Fox News before, but within seconds of seeing this guy, you can just see that he is a snake. At least he is currently conducting himself as such. Now, this is pretty basic what he's doing. He's not giving eye contact. He's pretending to be bored with the guy's very presence. And this is a way to discredit him that way, as if he's just some sort of gnat and not even worth considering, and that's why he's purposely looking down and acting bored when he talks to him. Secondly, he uses the word believe. Do you really believe? To believe is not to know, and that's why he's stressing that. And again, you're going to start to see extreme manipulation from this Mr. Hannity.
Do you really believe that 9/11 was an inside job, not just 9/11, but Madrid and Bali and there's a Cowie operation?
Well, you know, actually...
hang on a second.
Yeah, okay, fair.
All right, so what he does is he tries to take control of this conversation right away. He insinuates something, and the professor was smart enough to catch what he was saying, and then when he tried to respond to that, they'll insult you while they speak and try to continue speaking before you can actually reply to it. And therefore, it makes the professor look nuts. You know what I mean? Because if people don't catch this neuro-linguistic programming, if they don't catch the manipulation...
hang on a second. Do you believe personally that these are inside jobs, yes or no?
It's not quite that simple.
Okay, believe personally. That's another way to plant that into your psyche, that it is just he that believes this. And then he uses the yes or no trap, because that is, again, misleading if you can't see that. The way he twisted around that question would not allow the professor to be able to give a yes or no answer, because he injected manipulation into the question itself. So when the professor tries to say that, of course, then it puts him under pressure.
Yes or no?
It's not quite that simple. I do know, I don't believe, I know that 9/11 was an inside job. Professor Stephen Jones has found residue of fermate on the steel samples from the World Trade Center. We now know that it was taken down in a controlled demolition.
All right, so you believe that the buildings came down in a controlled demolition?
Okay, so the professor did a really good job of identifying his manipulation by saying, I don't believe, I know. And because he was starting to get through that, Hannity interrupts him and says, I don't have a lot of time. Well, wait a minute, you just asked him a question, and now he's able to break through your manipulation, and suddenly you don't have a lot of time for the very answer to the question that you just asked. The next thing you see, he asks him, what evidence does he have? And he interrupted him giving the evidence to ask him what evidence he has. Why? Of course, he's not interested in hearing the evidence or anybody else hearing it. He's interested in interrupting him and planting another embed into the psyche that what he happens to be saying right now is somehow not evidence. It's all misdirection of focus, redirection of focus, disrupting, interrupting, gaining control.
Demolition, right?
Well, I don't believe it. I've looked at the evidence,
you're right,
and the evidence is overwhelming.
All right, the evidence is overwhelming to you because you're a conspiracy nut, but
no, actually, all of you, I ask your viewers to take...
Okay. Now, in this one, I'm sure you caught the obvious part, but you probably did not catch the neuro-linguistic programming. What exactly is neuro-linguistic programming? Simply put, it's dual meaning that is speaking to the subconscious. Now, of course, he's shaping public opinion by saying, it's obvious to you because you are a conspiracy nut. Well, remember now, people are very phobic of being called anything that goes against the norm. So if you agree with him, oh, then you're a nut, and people, they can't escape their own ego. So that's used to shape him. What you probably didn't catch is him saying, but putting that all aside, this is neuro-linguistic programming. Now, pay attention here. You're a conspiracy nut, but putting that all aside, what that is doing is he's directing your subconscious mind and your conscious mind to store that label, that impression of him. Put it aside. Keep that. It's called anchoring.
The evidence is overwhelming to you because you're a conspiracy nut, but
no, actually, all of you, I ask your viewers to take a look at this evidence for themselves. They can go to st911.org. That's Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Take a look. Take a look at the demolitions.
I know you
Morgan Reynolds, a former Bush administration official.
Okay, that's pretty obvious. You see how he's treating him. Very nonchalant, irritated, bored. And I know you think you're the smartest guy in the world. This is, the typical you're a know-it-all type of comment. If you watch that David Icke video where he goes back on Wogan, he draws attention to the same thing, where he said, whoa, that's a cheap shot, when he said, you know it all. And the response was accurate. I'm not saying I know it all. But people are trained to hate people who, quote, know it all. Why? Because they want you to be dumb. That's why in society you have catchphrases that go around that people use, like, you think too much, you're too deep, you know it all. These have all become derogatory terms in this new Orwellian society.
There are clues to identifying them. One of them is duping delight, as seen in this following video. It shows Diane Downs compared to a person telling the truth. So you have two supposedly grieving mothers. Diane Downs is a killer, and she's duping delight throughout this video, as opposed to the mother, who is deep down in her soul suffering and being very truthful.
Now, we've talked a little bit about how to talk to someone who's lying and how to spot a lie. And as I promised, we're now going to look at what the truth looks like. And I'm going to show you two videos. Two mothers. One is lying, one is telling the truth. And these were surfaced by researcher David Matsumoto in California. And I think they're an excellent example of what the truth looks like. This mother, Diane Downs, shot her kids at close range, drove them to the hospital while they bled all over the car, claimed a scraggy-haired stranger did it. And you'll see when you see the video, she can't even pretend to be an agonizing mother. What you want to look for here is an incredible discrepancy between horrific events that she describes and her very, very cool demeanor. And if you look closely, you'll see duping delight throughout this video.
But at night, when I close my eyes, I can see Christy reaching her hand out to me while I'm driving, and the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most.
Now I'm going to show you a video of an actual grieving mother, Erin Runyon, confronting her daughter's murderer and torturer in court. Here you're going to see no false emotion, just the authentic expression of a mother's agony.
I wrote this statement on the 3rd anniversary of the night you took my baby. And you hurt her, and you crushed her, you terrified her, until her heart stopped. And she fought, and I know she fought you. I know she looked at you with those amazing brown eyes, and you still wanted to kill her. And I don't understand it, and I never will.
Okay, there's no doubting the veracity.
And then we follow with another example of George H.W. Bush at the Gerald Ford funeral.
The political crisis gathered over America. After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy, our nation turned to Gerald Ford and a select handful of others to make sense of that madness. And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but the Warren Commission report will always have the final, definitive say on this tragic matter.
Sometimes they're just oblivious. They're so caught up in their sheltered little worlds, surrounded by their minions and proto-psychopaths, that sometimes I don't think they even realize how they come across. And a good example of that is Larry Silverstein calmly describing how the World Trade Center Center 7 was, quote-unquote, brought down, as if nobody would ever ask any questions. And what's amazing is that Larry Silverstein is right. Not enough people have asked questions about this.
World Trade Center 7 had always been considered the starting point for rebuilding. Located north of the slurry wall, 7 had been cleared faster than the rest of the site, and there had been no bodies to recover. Pelted by debris when the North Tower collapsed, 7 burned until late afternoon, allowing occupants to evacuate to safety.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
We have an example here of John Gross, the head of NIST, which is the scientific group that ran the investigation, that he just denies and bold-faced lies in front of the camera, and denying that there was molten steel at 9/11, smirks, engages in a little bit of gaslighting with the questioner, and just acts as if though Everything is just hunky-dory, complete pulling the wool over anybody's eyes.
I'm curious about the pool of molten steel that was found in the bottom of the towers.
I am too.
And
please tell me about it. Have you seen it?
Well, not personally, but eyewitnesses there found huge pools of molten steel beneath the towers, and some scientists don't think that the collapse of the building could have melted all that steel. And physics professor analyzed some of the steel, and Stephen Jones, and he found evidence of thermate residue, which would explain how the buildings collapsed by means of pre-planted explosives. So, have you analyzed the steel for any of those residues?
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry. Like lava in a volcano.
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things. Out still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours.
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it was just a bright reddish orange color.
I know of absolutely nobody, no eyewitness who said so, nobody who produced it. I was on the site, I was on the steel yards, so I don't know that that's so.
There's video of it.
Melted around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's probably pretty difficult to get that kind of temperatures in fire. So I don't know the basis. I can't address your question if I don't know the basis.
Well, NASA pictures, thermal images showed those sorts of temperatures in the basement.
Could you send them to me?
Oh.
As society becomes more and more infected by psychopathy, there is a class of minions, or what are called proto-psychopaths, that developed. And these people are not psychopaths in the normal sense, but they have psychopath infection and go along for the ride, and sometimes they think they will benefit. They tend to be more of the cheerleaders and the minions. Many of these people are actually compromised. They may be selected for their proto-psychopathic tendencies by the psychopath and used by the psychopaths, but they're highly disposable people. There's also new evidence, a study done by the University of Michigan Sociology Department indicating that there's been an epidemic of proto-psychopaths caused by probably brainwashing. This research tells us that college students today are approximately 40% less empathetic than they were just 10 years ago.
This is a point I think is very important to stress to those in uniform and to those in the dark suits in government who are serving this system while not actually instigating it, they're serving it. You have no power. I don't care if you're in the military. I don't care if you've got how many kind of stars on your uniform. I don't care what level of the police force you're in. I don't care if you're doing roadblocks. I don't care if you're pulling people off the street. I don't care what you're doing. You have no power. Your uniform has the power. Take your uniform off, okay? Put it in the wardrobe. Where's your power? Go and get another job without that uniform. Where's your power? You have no power. You are employed to animate that uniform, which is an extension of the state, and that's all you are, and therefore you are expendable. While you give your soul away, while you give your mind away, while you give your morals and decency away, advancing this fascist dictatorship, you will be okay with the fascists that you're serving. But your children and your grandchildren have to live in the world you are creating. And one day you're going to have to understand that, and I don't envy you that moment, because it's going to be horrific when it dawns upon you the world that you've actually created. The people in uniform and the dark suits that administer the system while not being the originators of it, they have to start breaking ranks, okay? Get some backbone, open your mind, look at what's going on, and get some freaking backbone before you administer and impose and enforce a world that will be grotesque for your children and grandchildren. In fact, not even that, for yourself.